Hello everyone, today I'm looking at Ace Combat 5, the Unsung War. Right off the bat, I really did enjoy this game, and it's funny how it's part of this trilogy of games, really, and I didn't really think of it as a trilogy, more so this one and the Balkan War, because the amount of times the Balkan War gets mentioned in Ace Combat 5 is way more than I thought it would be, and there's a lot of lore and a lot of character development in 5 that I found to be really, really interesting. And it's funny because at first I really wasn't enjoying Ace Combat 5 because I felt it was leaning too hard into the realism factor. Another thing you realize is like the interface is more kind of I don't know, realistically this is what it would actually look like. Here's the briefing. And I would say the briefing also in 5 is probably the weakest, while 0 and 4 are the best. Like, I didn't realize it, but 4, when you have the briefing, or rather the post-mission report, where it has all of the little triangles and the sped-up version of your little representation, a little speedrun of what you did, it makes a sound every time you get a target. And that one little change, I feel, just missing that, I don't know, because I always looked forward to seeing that battle summary, while in the Nets games it wasn't really super important. But yeah, in terms of the briefing, they also have like the opening part sometimes will be just this big fat guy who looks like Peter Griffith, and I just could never unsee that, and that's kind of priming you for the mission. And for Ace Combat 4, I think it has the best briefing, and then 0, where it's all red and yellow and stuff. And also even the sound effects from the menu and the whole sound font is always very interesting, very distinct. I always appreciate it. But yeah, so I was a little bit reserved going into 5 because it seemed like they were really trying to do a more cinematic story. They're trying to tell a thing where the only thing I could feel is that it was trying really hard to be like Top Gun. Like it was trying to be like, okay, are you doing your own thing, or are you just trying to be Top Gun? Like, that's what you're aiming for. And so that's why I feel it's a little bit too similar in some sense. One thing I did appreciate is Ace Combat 4, not something I appreciated, but something I noticed is that the storytelling device in each one of these games is completely different medium. In Ace Combat 4, it was anime stills with voiceover. In this game, it's CG characters with full voice acting. And in 0, it's live action footage of actors with filters over them. So I find it just super interesting how each iteration of this series has a completely different medium for its cutscenes, really, besides the in-game, ones where it's about the actual jets and they're showing the jets. I suppose so. 5, yeah, it's more so focused on the cast of characters, which again I really didn't like, and honestly I didn't like the story all that much. For example, in the first few missions, you have like a Maverick-esque captain, and what he does is they're kind of under fire from these enemy recon crafts, and he's been told to stand down, and he disobeys orders on multiple occasions, and he's like, complaining about command, like they don't know what they're doing. And then he eventually, gets shot down, and in the process, by antagonizing these recon planes for Euctobania, they end up starting a war. And I thought, okay, this character is really, really stupid, until you find out later he might be something like a double agent. And so the amount of lore and interesting world building they've done in 5 alone, like they don't even bring a lot of things from 4. 4 didn't really have a very intense story. It was much more personal, but this one's dealing with history and politics and the formation of these nations. And what eventually ends up occurring or revealing itself is that these two nations are being forced to go to war. And like I said, they keep referencing the Balkan War and how they try to fight everyone. And what's really cool is that there's this kind of like journalistic research aspect to it, where they found out that, hey, after the Balkans were subdued by Oshia, a lot of the ex-fighter pilots joined the Ocean Air Force, and a lot of their ex-scientists and whatnot. And I found it super, super interesting because it becomes a little bit of a conspiracy story where essentially Belka is the country that is the major arms manufacturer, and it's the one responsible for all the main weapons. So basically their plot is to exhaust these two superpowers while reaping the benefits financially and using that to kind of stage their comeback on the world stage. So it's actually a very complex, interesting story as it develops. And this whole backstory about how they talk about the Balkan War and how they essentially instigated what I believe what was a real life idea for the Korean War, which is that MacArthur wanted to essentially create a radioactive barrier around the two countries by dropping a series of like 7 or 8 nuclear bombs to create a corridor of radiation that would divide the advancing army and protect them for the next X amount of years. And of course it never went through, but in this one it's fiction becomes reality. And so essentially Belka, has, they dropped 7 nukes, and the way they talk about it, it's like this big thing in recent history. And of course, it's talked about so much, and there's so much context, and everything is writing on this one conflict of this one country, that no wonder the next game they made was the Balkan War, which is a prequel, which is Zero. And I really need to learn my lesson. I need to stop playing prequels like Drakengard 3, Silent Hill 3? Is Silent Hill 3? No, sorry, Silent Hill 3 is not a prequel. Oh no, Silent Hill 2, because I thought it was detached, but still, like, having context. Like, yeah, I didn't realize that 3 was not like Silent Hill 2. I thought that 3 was its own standalone story, like James and Mary, but no, Heather is connected to Harry in Silent Hill 1, like, kind of obviously. Once you start playing the game, you're like, oh, okay, this is an actual direct sequel. Anyway, but even prequels, they all work off the knowledge of the previous games, which is super important. And Ace Combat Zero is like no exception, because if I played this before I played the Balkan War, I'd be much more hyped, because the build up and the contextualization of it is so impressive. It makes it feel like a real thing. I talked about the different kinds of cutscenes. Another thing that's very interesting about these 3 games is essentially how they treat their final boss. I found it interesting that they both have some kind of connections. I mean, first of all, the music in all of these games is incredible. In the ending to 4, they have this big chorus, Agnus Dei, epic orchestral chanting music. They have the same thing for Ace Combat 5. For Zero, it's funny, they scrapped that whole epic thing entirely for just Spanish guitars, which I really do appreciate. It's a very specific vibe, and I do really appreciate it. But for 5, though, again, like, I was kind of mixed on it, because essentially, you have the main theme, the Demon of Razgriz, which is, again, a deep male choral thing. And by the way, I never wanted to play this game until I saw the intro, essentially, and it is something very, just, like, it's absolute keynote, because you have this orchestral, choir going on, this epic music, it goes in combat music, and then it links into some, like, a Linkin Park song, and it's just, it's absolutely peak. The intro to this game is insanely 2000s, and just peak cool and peak aesthetic. And so yeah, for the final boss for this game, I have to admit, it's really cool. I mean, you have Ace Combat 4 just to fly through the tunnel, shoot a missile at the thing, to shoot the missile, to blow it up, whatever. Ace Combat 0, you also do the same kind of tunnel mission, go underneath, and the hatches are open, the vents are open, blow up the thing, and then you have a final showdown with another fighter pilot. So 5, it's you still have like a squad of elite fighters blocking you, but the final boss in this game is a satellite crashing to Earth. And when it enters the atmosphere, you hear the Demon of Razgriz play, and it's absolute Ludo. It's absolute peak gameplay. It's such a distinct vibe and such a distinct moment. It kind of redeems everything. The final boss in this game is so cool, and also a little bit frustrating. I think it's a good segue to talk about the gameplay. It's mainly unchanged from 4, lock on fire missiles. The one addition here is that now you have a fighter squadron, which is good and bad in some ways. So one thing is that you can tell them to attack, cover you, disperse, and use special weapons. They actually are pretty decent. They will actually shoot down a fair amount of targets if you're really struggling. And of course, as they use their special weapons, I'm pretty sure in this game you can just buy the jets and there's no special weapon options. I think they brought that back in 0. But yeah, you basically, because you have 4 other people, the amount of points it rewards you, it assumes that you're buying jets for 4 times over. So you could buy the new F-17, but you also can buy 3 more and then give it to your squad mates. And so it's good and bad in the sense that it gives you a lot more points than you really need. So by the end of the game, you can buy every single jet, whereas in the other 2 games, I feel like you need to do New Game Plus so you can actually get all the jets. But in this one, you have more than enough to get a jet, at least every jet, one for yourself. So it's like, yeah, I could spend money getting these high-end jets for my other squad members, but you're not the one flying them. It makes a difference, but not really a huge difference. So it's a cool idea, but ultimately it's not super engaging, I guess. And then in 0, they reduce it to just you and your wingman. So your wingman has a set jet and a set whatever, but you can choose a sub weapon. That's the only thing you can do. And I think that's maybe a better system because, I don't know, it was all right. Something else that was also funny and very frustrating is that, of course, there's always dialogue going on as you're doing these battles. And what's different in this one is that you can use the left and right D-pad to select certain dialogue options, which are just yes and no. And so that's kind of nice that it keeps, the mission interesting, that you can say, hey, Captain, should we pursue the target? And you can say no and see their reaction, perhaps making multiple playthroughs a bit more entertaining. But on the whole, I found it to be more frustrating than anything, because I'll be in the middle of tracking someone locking on, and they're asking me a question, and if you don't respond in a couple seconds, it ends up going away, and they think, oh, what, the captain's not responding, what's wrong with them? So you feel bad for not responding. But yeah, that's a kind of gimmicky. Speaking of gimmicks, there's quite a few. I feel like there's quite a few more levels in this game that are more, I don't want to say experimental or gimmicky in a sense. For example, there's one mission where you have to escort a civilian plane through a radar field. There's another one where you have to fly really low below the radar. There's one where you have to do a reconnaissance mission where you have to fly this plane and take a picture and fly out of there. There's another one where I'm thinking when you have to shoot the windmills, but that's the same one as the escort mission. There's a whole bunch of very highly specialized missions. Oh, the mission where you have to shoot the radio antennas synchronized perfectly 4 times in a row. That was a little difficult, a little frustrating. And so I don't mind those missions. I mean, some of them are very short, very kind of whatever. In this game, there are 27 missions, while Ace Combat 4 only had 17. So that's 10 more missions. And again, some of them are short, some of them are, kind of whatever, highly specialized. But they're the kind of missions where on a second playthrough, I would just not be interested in replaying them. And because, they have a very specific function, a very specific purpose, that there's only really one kind of plane you're going to choose to do it. And sometimes they're just tedious because you're just waiting around, waiting for it to go to Section A, like escort missions. Or just get over here, go over there, wait for them to do this. And yeah, so not the best, but it's what it is. There's also a lot more interesting new mechanics they introduce here. For example, the whole flying above 6,000 feet to avoid all this burst fire and whatever. That's kind of cool, if not a little bit frustrating or challenging, honestly, which is fair. I guess that brings me to one aspect of the story. There's this one mission where you have to fight this giant submarine in the North Sea, and it's this giant black submarine. And so So the story component to this one that they definitely show in the intro is they talk about the demon of Razgries, and it's like this fairy tale about this demon. It's actually a pretty cool story in terms of archetypes. It's about this demon, this black demon that's killed by this hero, but then after a certain amount of time, after like 1,000 years or something, men go mad and they start killing each other ruthlessly, and there's civil war everywhere and strife, and the demon returns not as a demon but as a hero who will now conquer an even bigger darkness that prevails in the world of chaos in the future. And so what's really cool about that is, well, I thought, oh, okay, they're going to tie this into Belka, the fact that there was this Belkan War, that there's going to be some demon, some ace fighter of the Belkan War that used to be an enemy, but now he's, been resurrected or defected, and now he's fighting for Osea. Now he's like a good guy, or he's, some scourge of whatever. That's what I thought they were going to do, that the captain is like, oh, he's actually the demon of Razgries. He's the one who's like that. And no. So this one mission where you're fighting the submarine, I thought, okay, that black submarine that's very distinctly shaped in the North Sea, that's going to be the Razgries. So no, apparently because they look up at the jets who are like fighting and taking on this gigantic aircraft carrier submarine thing, that they see your black jets and like, oh, look, those are the black demons of Razgries. Yeah, freaking Family Guy. It's kind of it's like, okay, I guess. Like, your jets are black no matter if you're in the North Sea or not. And so they end up, sinking the submarine, and that's how word spreads out about them. And again, the story does take a very interesting aspect to it about the whole conspiracy, where they're figuring out their own admiral and certain other people in their army were all ex-Belkan military, and they're just like, uh-oh, this isn't good. And there's this one section in the game where they get like chased off the military base, and they're fugitives, and they get like blown up and flee and into the ocean, and then somehow they're picked up by the Admiral of Osea and the President, and so they're officially KIA, officially, but unofficially, truly, they've just escaped. And it's kind of like, okay, they escaped and they find this other admiral and the president, but then they're reinstated, no problem. So it's just like there's just one rogue element on that one military base, so they're not actually fugitives. It was kind of like a weird gray area, but it doesn't matter because you're back up in your plane and you're flying around taking out bad guys again, so it doesn't matter. And again, that mission preceding it's a really cool mission where they have to go to rescue the president, who's being held in a castle on the Belkan hinterlands and the borderlands, and it's a very cool place, and like you can see the craters from the nukes they dropped on their own country 15 years ago, and it's a very cool story and game, and it gets much better in the second half, where again I thought it was going to lean too much into realism. I thought the entire scope of the story is like there's a hotshot pilot and he doesn't follow rules. No, it goes into like the history of this fake country, this fairy tale, this lore. But again, the issue with the Demon of Razgries, and again, I love the idea of it, I love the emblem, I love the song, I love everything about it. It's just that what is actually, even the lore that's written about it, that's a really cool thing, is that every 5 levels, it changes the load screen to a different quote or section of this fairy tale poem as the mission's loading. I love that as well. But the in-game reason why they call them the Demon of Razgries is that they're just 4 black jets in the North Sea. That's it. Like, that's why they call them that. Oh, and they're really deadly. But it doesn't even like the lore was that a series of time would pass, and then so it's like the Belkans are now the Demon of Razgries, like, or the ace combat pilot. That's what it should be. It should have been the captain, but whatever. I'm not a writer, so I feel again, I love the idea of it. I just hate how it's under executed. That's it. Speaking of under executing, something I've noticed about these games and why they feel, I guess, so realistic despite, or at least photorealistic despite being kind of PS2 games, is that a lot of the time you're in your jet and you're going at Mach speeds and you're not paying attention to the environment below you. Because, if you actually stopped your plane and actually bothered to look at the environments, it's just hyper stretched textures. Like, they're just very stretchy, mushy textures that don't look very good, but you don't really bother looking at it because you're just blowing up targets on a screen and it's just fun, right? That's fine, except for one mission, particularly in this game, where, again, very different. A bunch of terrorists launch these chemical warfare clouds around what is basically New York City, and you have to essentially put out the smoke with like anti-smoke bombs or something, or like fire retardant bombs or whatever, which again is pretty cool. But it starts zooming in on the terrorist van, and you have to like track this van through like downtown, and then it gets stuck on a bridge and they're held up in a gunfight. And so you're watching this thing, and the problem is it's zooming in on it, and you just like they're showing you how poorly detailed the environments are. And again, when you're in the countryside, it doesn't matter, but you're showing like the equivalent of New York City, and it's very kind of embarrassing how untextured everything is, or how stretched it is. And so it's the one mission where it just actually breaks immersion. You have this tiny car, it is going along, the friggin', roads that don't look like roads, and the avenues that don't look like avenues, and the buildings that don't look like buildings. And it looks like a little toy car, basically. So it's the one part of the game where I'm like, oh man, this is not good. Yeah, and there are other missions too. Like, I think another really cool one is that you have to do a presidential flyby. And, you see that in games all the time, or movies all the time, where a bunch of jets fly overhead and the president makes his big speech. Well, you have to do that. You actually just have to stay in formation, and you have to stay in formation and look cool in order to pass the mission. And then, of course, it leads into an actual mission, which is gameplay, and, like, you get a surprise attack. But I just think it's cool that they really went all out for all the different types of scenarios you can put a jet in. It's from everything from, like, firefighting to fanfare to escorting. I don't know. It was really cool, if not a little bit gimmicky, and things that are like, yeah, it was a cool mission, but I wouldn't want to play it again, kind of thing. But they were very innovative, is what I'm trying to get at, I guess. And again, with the whole Belkin thing, it makes sense why they did Zero as the next game, because the hype for this was just so big. I think the other thing that's interesting about this game is you kind of realize there's three kinds of families of jets that are purchasable and kind of in development. So you have the F-14 or the Fs or whatever family, and they kind of peak with the F-22A Raptor. You have the SUs, which I think are the Soviet style jets, and so they peak with the Su-47 with the inverted wing design. And then you have the MiGs, which are definitely, Soviet, and they peak with the MiG 1.44 or something. And so it's interesting, by the end of the game, you have three kind of top-tier jets to actually choose from. And it's a matter of, the sub-weapon, obviously, and also what they're good at. So one of it is good from air-to-air, the other one is good for, air-to-ground, and the other one is an all-rounder. But all of them, all the designs on these jets they're super, super cool. And it's just a matter of figuring out which one you like the best. I'm pretty sure in Zero, my favorite one was the Raptor, and it's still good in this game, but I feel like in Zero, you can feel the speed difference when you pilot the Raptor. Maybe I go back and play 5 a little bit, but in Zero, all I remember is that taking the Raptor on level 1, whereas you'd be chasing down, enemies and trying to get behind them and maneuvering, the Raptor, the F-22 Raptor moves so fast, it feels like enemy jets are basically helicopters standing still. It's really ridiculous how maneuverable it is in Zero, and it's still good here as well. But in Zero, it feels ridiculously overpowered. Also, I'm very ashamed to say this is the first time I realized that giant green reticle for when you're in gun range, even though it's off the target, that's actually accounting for velocity and airspeed, and that's actually what you're supposed to be aiming for. I never knew that. I've played a lot of jet simulator games, and I never actually figured that out until now. I just thought you have to visually line up the crosshair. No, you have to do it with whatever. Again, I love the Ace Combat series. There's a lot of very cool concepts and themes and just technologies that they pop up throughout the entire series. Everything from Stonehenge in the first one, which is like this like satellite laser beam construction thing that just one-shots things out of the sky. You have these burst missiles which take out everything below 6,000 feet. You have things like the Arc Bird, which is like originally a symbol for peace, and this aircraft for space exploration that's again had a giant laser beam attached to it. So yeah, it become this flying fortress. You have this ultimate submarine carrier that can also launch drones and stuff. You have, in the Balkan War, I think it was something similar to Stonehenge. It was this giant facility, this giant round facility that could launch all these lasers and missiles and whatever. And then, of course, you have like orbital satellites, which can launch like nukes and missiles and lasers and all that good stuff. And so I always do really appreciate a lot of the Ace Combat lore, but also the technology in it is also very distinct as well. So Ace Combat has a lot of things going for it. Again, the music is phenomenal. The characters, not really. I mean, the only Ace Combat character I can really think of is Pixie from Zero. Like, he's kind of the guy, and outside of him, yeah, it's like, it's funny how Mobius 1 feels like he has a personality, but we know nothing about him. He's just Mobius 1. He's just the guy. And with Ace Combat 5, it's, yeah, you have the captain and Nagase and Chopper, who gets, he dies. And you're Blaze. Oh, I forgot you're Blaze. So that's the thing. You like, your main character in this one, yeah, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I don't know. I think after this, I might go back to Ace Combat 7. I had started that a while back, but never really got into it. I don't know. I just wasn't really feeling it. Maybe I'm going to try it now and maybe revisit and see why that is. Maybe now that I have Ace Combat knowledge and lore, I'll appreciate it more, hopefully. But yeah, for now, that's kind of where I sit with saying that I wish I played this series from 450, because they are really a little family of games that are not just I mean, 4 is purely aesthetic, purely style. The story's not really super important, but the style is very, very strong. If someone were to get into this series, I'd absolutely recommend starting with 4. It is really, really good. And that's the other thing too. Each of these games, usually I have a big discrepancy in like the Metroid Prime series. I have certain preferences for like certain games, but here they're all very good. And it's only, I would say, that the Balkan War is probably the best by only a slight margin. And yeah, so playing 5-0 I think would be a completely different experience. But that's where it is. I love these games. I love the Ace Combat series. I hope they make more. But yeah, that's 5 and the series as a whole. Anyway, guys, I'll see you later.